I would really particularly want to thank everybody for being here this morning, given all of the events in Washington this morning, which I'm told are available for viewing at your local bar. Thank you, Dean Lester and Jennifer Rogers. The law school and CAPI have helped advance the study of public integrity and create a critical space for practitioners and researchers to convene. And it's wonderful to be part of that and to be part of this year's Global Cities Conference. I also want to acknowledge my predecessor, Rose Gill-Hearn, CAPI's chair. Rose, it's always good to see you. We may call ourselves by different names, inspectors general, integrity monitors, investigators, but our goal is the same. Expose the facts, root out the wrong, and hold accountable those who use their government access for self-profit. This role is challenging, especially in these highly charged times, where rhetoric and tweets are passed off as truths and the concept of a neutral, impartial fact, especially when it does not track an individual agenda, can be derided as fake or an alternative view. But facts, as John Adams observed, are stubborn things. Facts are the cornerstone of integrity. They set the record straight. They persist. Facts don't lie. Facts are also the foundation of the work each of us does, and our duty to the public is unequivocal. Find and document the facts. This work matters more now than ever. Distrust of government, distrust of established facts has reached new and disturbing levels in this country. And that distrust saps government's very ability to command the respect and resources necessary to build, to regulate, to protect. 80 years ago, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt revolutionized the role of government, building schools and roads on an unprecedented scale, regulating finance and protecting the poorest among us. And as he reviewed the first 4 years of the New Deal in his second inaugural address, he explained that this new vision of government required that it, quote, obtain the justified support, unquote, of the people governed. Justified support. That phrase should be hung on a sign over the entryway of every municipal building in the country. With justified support, government has done great things. In the 1930s, it brought electricity to the Tennessee Valley. In the 1940s, it won a world war and rebuilt Europe. In the 1960s, it put a man on the moon. So how do we protect, how do we nurture the people's justified support going forward? Well, how do we combat the deep distrust that threatens justified support? President Roosevelt, again in his second inaugural address, argued that government could obtain justified support when, quote, the people receive true information of all that government does, unquote. True information, transparency, the facts. I believe that advice is as good now as it was in 1937, and that transparency is our obligation. Democracy cannot function without it. DOI's nearly 144-year history speaks to an unwavering dedication to seek the truth and to present a clear and unimpeachable accounting of the facts. Today, we embody that legacy by attacking corruption, fraud, waste, abuse, and incompetence, by conducting comprehensive investigations that expose and stop criminal conduct, that result in preventive internal controls, and lead to operational reforms that improve the way the city runs, all by staying focused on presenting the facts. Our historic oversight of this city allows DOI a unique vantage point where we can truly shape the strategy for individual problems we uncover, where we can demonstrate why and how integrity matters, all by providing true information of all that government does. Here are 3 ways in which we're doing that. Let me start with the New York City Department of Correction. In the winter of 2014, our city's jail system was reaching a boiling point. Inmates were dying, violence was out of control, and contraband smuggling flourished. DOI had long been rooting out corrupt correction officers and doing a terrific job of putting them in jail. But the troubles within the city's main jail complex on Rikers were escalating and capturing regular headlines, one more troubling than the next. In one, Rikers, where mental illness meets brutality in jail. Another, Rikers Island, violence rises, nearly 20 inmates attacked in 1 month. And a New York Times editorial summarized it best: a culture of violence at Rikers Island. The problem was out of control, and DOI had to pull together all of the facts so a new strategy could respond to this crime wave. We focused on fundamentals: conducting investigations, making arrests, and issuing reports that demonstrated where the city's correction department needed to target its efforts. We brought attention to the necessity of strengthening security at dock staff entrances after conducting an undercover operation that showed how easy it was to bring in contraband. We gave an undercover officer a slew of contraband concealed on him, including a razor blade, a bottle of vodka, 250 glassine envelopes of heroin, and half a pound of marijuana. He cleared security 6 out of 6 times. We discovered that between courier fees and resale value, corrupt correction officers stood to make thousands of dollars with these types of trips. Our work in this area led to the introduction of drug-sniffing dogs at staff entrances and a heightened understanding of why screening at these entrances is so important. But let's be clear, more work remains. DOI investigators also uncovered a flawed system in which more than a third of officers were hired despite numerous red flags for corruption and safety in their backgrounds, such as multiple prior arrests and convictions, prior association with gang members, or relationships with inmates. Equally troubling, the correction department's unit responsible for screening potential recruits relied on an antiquated and haphazardly filed paper personnel documents and had little to no access to the software necessary to perform basic background and credit checks. DOI issued a series of recommendations for the agency to strengthen its protocols because you cannot change a problematic culture without hiring people of integrity. This hiring issue remains a very serious concern, and we continue to investigate the matter. During the past 3 years, DOI has arrested 39 dock staff on an array of criminal charges, including promoting prison contraband, assault, and sexual assault. Most recently, as some of you may have heard, we uncovered serious lapses by high-level dock executives, including the commissioner. These investigations have led to a better understanding of what is instigating the problems. Right now, elected officials are discussing closing down Rikers Island in the next decade. Our role as inspectors general is to present the facts for policymakers to use. Regardless of whether Rikers is shuttered, the issues we have found, poor screening for contraband, flawed and deficient hiring and promotion standards, and failure to follow the rules at the highest level, are problems that are not resolved by closing Rikers alone. Additional change will be required. And needless to say, our work in this area is not done. The second area I'd like to talk about is the Administration for Children's Services. When I was a young lawyer, I worked for a nonprofit called Children's Rights, Inc. It's a national organization that uses the law to protect thousands of abused and neglected children And there I saw firsthand dire examples of children in need of protection. It's been an issue since then that's been very close to my heart. Long before I came to DOI, the agency had an active history in overseeing the City Administration for Children's Services, or ACS, conducting a lengthy investigation in 2007 and another in 2011, which both revealed a broken system of investigating child abuse cases and shined a light on the deficiencies in protecting children in imminent danger. It was not long before a series of child deaths and near deaths occurred early in my tenure at DOI that we realized that still more needed to be done. One child was severely malnourished, sustaining a life-threatening injury during an improperly conducted ACS investigation. Another child died suspiciously after years of ACS intervention and repeated earlier ACS findings that the child was neglected. A third child was beaten to death after years of ACS intervention, and after an ACS provider agency returned the child to a dangerous home. We'd all seen this tragic pattern before and wanted to ensure that reforms would be made. We took the first step, and that first step's an important one: publicly outlining our findings and the problem. DOI investigators looked at these cases and found serious deficiencies, including failing to properly investigate allegations of child abuse and neglect and protect children's safety and well-being while the family is involved with ACS. Simply put, ACS was failing in its mission. This conclusion was never more evident than when ACS received an anonymous child abuse complaint late last year, and over a 2-day period failed to locate an obtainable address, an address already in the city's own databases, for the 3-year-old child who was in imminent danger. Ultimately, ACS located the address for the child just hours before he was beaten into a coma. ACS didn't get to the home in time, and the child later died. DOI investigators worked hard to get the data and to get the ACS workers who handled the case so that we could best understand where the breakdowns happened. It was a challenge, particularly after DOI found concerns with staff performance, concerns originally dismissed by ACS, concerns ACS only took seriously once our fact-finding was made public, once the public had true information. What DOI found in its investigation was both stark and disturbing, cutting to the heart of ACS's core mission of protecting children and implicating high-level systemic problems. We felt it was essential to have public accountability on this significant case. It was about getting out the facts, outlining what needed to change, and demonstrating government's failure in protecting this child. A new commissioner has been appointed at ACS since the release of those findings. He appears to be taking these findings quite seriously, and we look forward to working with him. At the same time, we will remain vigilant. The third issue I'd like to talk about is construction-related fraud and safety. As I think everyone in this room knows, there is a powerful connection between integrity and fraud. It's one that DOI has seen play out in its investigations, where contractors file false information with the city, or refuse to pay workers their legal wage, or hire unpermitted professionals to do a job. These acts are not just ethical lapses, but often compromise safety as well. These cases run the gamut. We have arrested contractors who turned a deaf ear to numerous safety warnings, resulting in fatal trench and wall collapses and workers' deaths. We've arrested licensed professionals who evaded the rules and allowed their licenses to be used to certify work they would never see, leading to catastrophic consequences, such as a fatal gas explosion last year on the Lower East Side. We've arrested bosses in Harlem who have falsified payroll records and stolen their workers' wages. While the scenarios may be different, the implication is the same. These cases undercut safety and endanger the public. This is an area where DOI has worked on multiple platforms, attacking wrongdoing criminally and administratively, and developing innovative ideas that attempt to change some of the basic problems that we see. For instance, when these worker fatalities occur, getting there early with the right team of people is crucial. To address that need, DOI worked with prosecutors to form the Construction Fraud Task Force that jumps on these cases immediately, looking to see where integrity has been breached, whether any of it rises to a crime, and identifying safety gaps that can be remedied. We've reached out to workers, establishing a give-back program with the Manhattan District Attorney, where workers can turn in fraudulent safety training cards and receive training in a proper safety card. This serves an important purpose, getting fraudulent cards off the streets and ensuring that workers are adequately trained on safety. So far, through this effort, I'm pleased to report we have trained more than 1,400 workers who now have legitimate cards and proper safety training to know how to work safely and know how to report safety violations when they see them. And we know our efforts are already having an impact. Last year, a case we investigated resulted in a landmark manslaughter conviction of a general contractor who had ignored repeated safety warnings. This outcome, along with other cases we are working on, sends a powerful message that when deaths happen, they will be investigated, and if wrongdoing is found, people and companies will be held accountable. To sum up, as the city's independent inspector general, DOI's jurisdiction is broad and our impact is equally wide. Our effectiveness rests on our ability to see the systemic problems across agencies and how it impacts the city as a whole. Throughout, DOI's strength in our long history, our commitment, like everyone in this room, is to go where the facts lead us, finding the facts without fear or favor. Fiorello LaGuardia, one of New York City's greatest mayors, understood the significance of that integrity has on good governance. In the 1930s, he successfully fought the grip of Tammany Hall, a cadre of insiders in New York City who manipulated politics during the 19th and early 20th centuries. He instilled reform and independence into the governance of the city. It's been reported that among the first words LaGuardia said after being sworn in as mayor were these: "To the victor belongs the responsibility of good government." LaGuardia took those words to heart, and so should we. Each of us is part of that powerful responsibility. We must be a steady force, undeterred by politics, guided only by the facts. The facts can overcome a din of rhetoric. They endure. In our roles, it's our job to safeguard the facts, to ensure that they see the light of day, to hold our officials accountable to them. Facts are stubborn things, and we must be stubborn in our commitment to them. We are the guardians of FDR's true information that allows government to maintain justified support. Because integrity really does matter. Thank you very much. Is there time for questions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's take some questions. Phil.
Hi.
Mark, excuse me, Mark, how do you advocate for the facts after you establish them? So if we live in a world of alternative facts, why isn't your facts that you create just an alternative opinion? What is your role, your enhanced role now to basically combat the fact that, thank you very much, Commissioner,
You know, it's a great question, and it cuts to the heart of what we all think about. There are several things. One is, DOI has 700 staff, and they are some of the finest investigators and law enforcement people anywhere in the country. And so when we issue, first of all, we never, ever talk about our cases until we're done, at which point we either issue reports or arrest people. And when we issue reports, if you've seen any of them, we are very careful to do a couple things. One, literally they are without adjectives. They are just a recitation of the facts. And two, we cherish our reputation for getting our facts right. We are extraordinarily precise in our accounting of those facts with overwhelming evidence to support them, so that there is simply no way to deny the avalanche of facts that are contained in the reports that we issue. And then, frankly, part of our role, part of my role, is the ability to take this avalanche of facts that there is no disputing because it is just one fact dropping on top of another on another, to distill it down to bite-sized chunks, and to then spend time, and some of my staff are here and they spend a huge amount of time on it, to distill those facts down and to explain them to the public, to be public about it, not only in speeches to groups like this, but in press releases, in press conferences, in testimony, and to be relentless in distilling down those facts without ever adding adjectives or false passion or any sense of an agenda beyond describing the facts. And you need to be ruthless with yourself to never let your opinions get in there.
Can I have one follow-up?
Sure.
I guess my question is that enough? Because I've read a lot of IP reports, and they're brilliant. And then it's like a tree forming in the forest, frankly, because people don't advocate for their findings. So, while I agree, my question is, how much do you have to advocate for the recommendations that you're making?
Sure. Obviously, there are several ways we advocate for this. One is by issuing reports and talking about them forcefully. And I think, for example, if you take a look at the issues with ACS and with DOC, I think you will see that not only did we issue reports, one on ACS early this year and one on DOC last month, but we managed to get the message of those reports out fairly broadly. We also advocate internally. I will go and I will brief commissioners, brief deputy mayors, brief the mayor, brief the city council, so that they understand the facts. I think, we've seen some changes. After our report on ACS was written, the ACS got a new commissioner and is beginning to make some changes. We wrote our report on DOC, and DOC is now going to be getting a new commissioner. So I think it is safe to say that these reports have had some real-world impact. I'm certainly not suggesting they have fixed the problems. They haven't. I'm not suggesting that they were the only reason that things got changed. They weren't. But I think that if you take a look, for example, at those two sets of reports in those agencies, you will see that not only are they both getting new leadership after these reports, but in fact, there are certain concrete changes being made. We need to do more, and this goes to the final point I'll make, which is follow-up. One temptation when you're running an agency like DOI is to issue a report, get a couple of changes, get some agreements to some changes, declare victory, and go home. And what you need to do, and we found this interestingly enough in the NYCHA context, and I think it is safe to say that everybody in this room and everybody in New York City will be hearing a great deal more from DOI over the next year about NYCHA, without going beyond that, but stay tuned, is you gotta constantly follow up. So last year we wrote a report in which we pointed out that both NYCHA and the NYPD were not doing a good job of communicating. The NYPD was not telling NYCHA when crimes were committed on NYCHA property. And NYCHA, even when they did hear about this is the New York City Housing Authority, even when they heard about it, they were not doing a good job of permanently excluding the criminals from NYCHA property to keep the place safe, and as a result, the crime rate in NYCHA is about 4 times the city average. So we wrote a report last year. Everybody said, okay, we'll fix it. We went back this year and did a new report to see had they fixed it. Now, the good news is the NYPD, to their credit, really had. The NYPD is now doing a very good job of getting that information over to NYCHA. The bad news is that NYCHA did a terrible job. NYCHA did virtually nothing to fix the problem and was doing virtually nothing to fix the problem. And so we wrote a report that said we're glad the NYPD is doing what it should. We are very, very troubled that NYCHA is not doing what it should and is continuing to keep people in housing who are dangerous. That report, as some of you may know, garnered a fair amount of attention. NYCHA, by the way, in fact, objected. In fact, they labeled it alternative facts. I think it is unfortunate for the head of NYCHA to label the report of an investigative body alternative facts. I think it is unfortunate for the head of NYCHA to then circulate a letter of support written by an entity that has previously lent its name to the shooting of police officers and to describe the police at NYCHA as a occupying force. We will have more to say about this, but you need to keep on it. NYCHA isn't doing what it should. NYCHA, in fact, I think has gone in the other direction by circulating letters that describe the NYPD as, quote, an occupying force, close quote, at NYCHA. And so this is one where we have to just keep working on it, and we will. We've seen some real changes at ACS and at DOC, although a lot more needs to be done. And hopefully this time next year, we will see changes at NYCHA as well. But you got to be relentless.
How closely does your office work with the prosecutorial authorities, whether it be the DA or the U.S. Attorney?
Sure, very closely. I mean, we arrested 700 some odd people last year, I think it was. We work very, very closely with prosecutors. Obviously, a lot of our cases are criminal, and we do end up arresting people. DOI has the authority to arrest people. We do not have the authority to indict people, of course. Our general view is at the point at which we believe that a case is going in a criminal direction, we tend to reach out to prosecutors sooner rather than later, because when I was a prosecutor, I wanted people to reach out to me sooner rather than later as well. So we have very, very close working relationships with all 5 district attorneys, with the state attorney general, with the special narcotics prosecutor, with the 2 U.S. attorneys. And so we will tend to bring them into cases early on when we think that we're going to want to end up arresting people. Yes?
I know that DOI often starts its cases from complaints, whistleblowers, sometimes, as you described with the Department of Corrections, even the newspapers are screaming so loudly about something, and you start to look. Is there also any effort to do kind of more routine performance audits and look at an agency just because you haven't looked at it in a while, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. We do a lot of that, actually, and a lot of cases come out of that. So every agency in the city of New York has an inspector general. Those inspector generals and those agencies are grouped together in squads. And so in addition to responding to complaints, which we certainly do, those inspectors general meet with their commissioners on a regular basis, and they are routinely, as we put it, kicking the tires of those agencies. I think, in fact, Milton Yu, who's my inspector general for a couple of agencies, most notably HRA, is going to be giving a presentation later on, either today or tomorrow, on data mining, and that's a lot of what we do, is this kind of data mining, where we look at the data, we look for patterns, we look for trends, we look to see. I don't want to steal, I'm going to say only one more sentence so I don't steal Milton's thunder, because basically Milton does great work and then occasionally I step in and take credit for it. But basically we do that kind of data mining for just that purpose.
Do all of your inspectors general have criminal law enforcement powers?
Yes, absolutely.
Was that from the beginning?
Yes, that's always been the case.
What's your budget structure?
What we have, we are budgeted for 721 staff. The exact dollar figure that goes with that with OTPS, I think it's, I was about to give you a number and I'm not sure I'm right, so I'm going to pass on the exact number these days.
Independent budget, though?
How'd you mean?
I'm the former chief inspector general for the state of Florida, and we had inspectors general in each state agency as well. But we were part of the agency head's budget.
Oh, okay, I see what you, yeah.
So we weren't truly independent.
Right. No, that's very, very interesting. There, with a couple of exceptions, one of which involves NYCHA and is sort of interesting. DOI is a separate agency, separate from any other entity in about 25, 30 years ago. It used to be the IGs were part of their agencies, but 25, 30 years ago, they were all moved to DOI. So we get a single solitary, we get a budget from the city to do our work. It doesn't have to come from each of the agencies. There are one or two exceptions to this because there are several entities like NYCHA. The New York City Housing Authority is technically not a city agency, it's an authority with a board. Those agencies, there are 3 or 4 of them, provide budgets to us to fund their IG line, their IG's offices. The memorandum of understanding that set up these offices state that they must provide adequate funding, but we are in fact fighting right now with NYCHA. NYCHA, essentially because they were not happy with this and several other reports, has made a couple of attempts to cut our budget because they don't like having an inspector general, and this is a good way to push back at it. And they have not said that's the reason for the funding, but the timing is interesting, let's say. And happily, the city council, to its credit, has pushed back very hard on that, and our funding is, largely been stable there. But other than the 1 or 2 authorities like that, we get our central funding from the city. Yes?
Commissioner, what's been the follow-up, if any, with the city council? You just mentioned there was a budgetary issue on those 2 key reports you mentioned earlier, ACS, Children's Services, and the Correctional Services, because obviously they have as a legislative body an oversight role. I wonder how they interact with you on those reports.
Sure. I mean, the council has really, especially in the last couple of years, very much stepped up their involvement in these kinds of things. And they have not yet, they held hearings on ACS. They have not yet held hearings on the dock issue, but the report just came out a month ago. But on a number of key reports, including the NYCHA report that I seem to keep coming back to, the council has been very, very good about then following up. And this is another way to go back to the how do you get the point across. Certain council chairs, and I'll give a quick shout out to Richie Torres, who's the one of the council chairs over housing, have been very, very good about holding hearings in which they've called commissioners in and said, okay, let's go through this DOI report. They said this, this, and this. Do you disagree with them? And because our facts are usually sufficiently overwhelming, there's no ability to say anything other than, yes, their facts are, no, we can't prove the facts are wrong. Okay, if you agree that the facts are right, then why aren't you doing X? And that's another way of government continuing to self-regulate and keep pressure on it. I think it's a really important point to bring out. Thank you, Pat. Okay.
Let's thank Commissioner Peters.
Thank you very much.